Oh, thanks very much and warm welcome to Whether or Not. Today we do have our Professor Francois Engelbrecht, a chief researcher in the Natural Resources and Environmental Unit with the CSIR, a lead author of Chapter 3, IPCC Special Report on the Impacts of Global Warming of 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. Professor, welcome.
Many thanks, Ashley.
Thanks very much. Let's go straight to it. Severe weather has been becoming more common lately in South Africa. What is your take on that?
Ashley, indeed we are observing a global increase in the frequency of occurrence of extreme weather events. And it is indeed also the case in South Africa. So here in South Africa, over the last few decades, we can observe a marked increase in temperatures for a start. So our temperatures are increasing rapidly at almost twice the global rate of temperature increase.
That's extremely dangerous. I mean, looking at that, twice the rate as it's supposed to be. So how is that affecting our weather? Because we've seen severe weather becoming more common. So does that have a direct link to our weather?
Yeah, there is unfortunately a direct link. So when we observe that average temperatures are increasing, it is also because seasons with a high number of heat wave days,
yes,
and seasons associated with extreme drought,
yes,
such seasons are also gradually increasing over our interior regions specifically.
Okay.
So the big El Nino of the year 2015-16,
yes,
that was associated with this very widespread drought in our summer rainfall region.
Okay.
That type of event is gradually on the increase. And as global warming intensifies and as the greenhouse effect strengthens further,
yes, yes,
we unfortunately have to prepare ourselves for an even higher frequency of these seasons are associated with extreme drought and heat over our country.
Higher frequency. Like looking at the temperature increase, the current increase, it's at 0.8, yes? And then now we're looking at an increase of 1.5 degrees Celsius increase. So how are we going to be able to survive then at 0.5? Because currently we've seen the weather events that happened in the Western Cape, going to KwaZulu-Natal this year. And again, looking at the hailstorm of a size of a grapefruit in Argentina this year. So are we still going to be able to survive? Are we going to be able to adjust with the 1.5 degree increase?
Yes, that is now a key question that the Africa group in the climate negotiations has also been asking over the last few years.
Yes.
So let me just say that in 2015 we've actually now reached the 1 degree Celsius threshold. So the globe is now already 1 degree Celsius warmer than what it is supposed to be. So that is now compared to the pre-industrial conditions.
Yes.
And now currently, at the rate that we are currently emitting carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, we are now steaming towards reaching that critical 1.5 degrees Celsius target. That's now globally in 2030, more or less. And around about by 2050, we are projected to reach the 2 degrees Celsius target or the threshold. And the question is, what will that mean for our country? And unfortunately, for our country, it means even a higher frequency of extreme events. So that summer of 2015-16 that I think many viewers will remember.
Yes.
During that summer, our average temperatures were about 2 degrees Celsius above our own climatological average.
Okay.
And we all can remember how that felt, and we remember the heat waves.
Yes.
We can recall that our maize crop yield was very low.
Yes, I mean, also looking at that, the heat waves and the drought in the Western Cape. I mean, there's still like a continuation in the Western Cape. There's not enough water, not enough rainfall. So if you're saying in 2050 that the temperatures might reach an increase of 2 degrees Celsius, so what's going to happen from now until 2050?
Well, let me first mention something interesting to you. The drought in the southwestern Cape, it is probably the worst drought in about 30 years. But there were similar droughts in the late 1960s and also in the late 1920s.
Yes.
That specific southwestern Cape drought cannot be directly attributed to climate change.
Okay.
But of course, our population has been growing in Cape Town, so the water demand is so much bigger than it was in the 1960s or the 1920s.
Okay.
So increased demand in combination with the drought has brought us into the state of crisis in Cape Town in terms of water.
So if you're saying that we cannot say that the drought in Western Cape is due to climate change, meaning that it is normal, meaning that is it possible for the Western Cape to recover from the current drought?
A temporary recovery is possible, but I should say that unfortunately because of climate change, we are expecting gradual increases in temperature in Cape Town, which means more evaporation, drier vegetation along the Cape South Coast, so more fire-prone conditions. But unfortunately, because of climate change, these seasons of drought in the southwestern Cape are also projected to occur more and more frequently as we move deeper into the century. So I think our vulnerability in Cape Town to drought and water scarcity is unfortunately only going to increase as we move deeper into the century.
Okay, now is it possible for us to say, okay, if we work together as scientists and people on Earth, that can we work together and temperatures not exceed 1.5 to remain maybe below 1.5?
We will need to work together as a species like we've never done before. It will require a massive international effort.
But at least there is a possibility. Now,
there's still a slim chance that we can avoid this 1.5 degree Celsius threshold, but it means we almost immediately need to cease emitting further carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, which means we need to change the way in which we are generating energy on the planet.
Okay.
So we must make a big shift.
So energy is the main problem.
Our dependence on coal and oil is the main problem. We need to make a big shift to the renewable forms of energy and to nuclear energy and use those two increasingly in combination. So it is very likely that we are going to overshoot this 1.5 degrees Celsius target.
Yes.
Perhaps we can still avoid the 2 degree threshold, but we need to change the way in which we live on the planet, and that is a very, very big challenge, of course.
Okay, Professor, just to cut it short, like as individuals, you and I, what is it that we can do to try and contribute on a small scale so that we don't go over 1.5 degrees Celsius?
Well, we need to live our lives in the most sustainable way possible. For example, I can predict that in the next 30 years or so, there's going to be a big change in which we manage our transport on the planet. So instead of buying the biggest, fuel combustion engine car, start buying electric cars or hybrid cars. So we all need to reduce our carbon footprint as much as we can. But the most important thing South Africans can do is to apply some pressure to policymakers, so that we as a country put pressure on the rich, developed countries, because we should also realize that most of the carbon dioxide emissions are not coming from us in Africa.
True.
Most of the responsibility sits in the northern hemisphere, in the big economies of China and the USA. And if those two economies are not going to make this big shift to renewables and or nuclear, it doesn't really matter, unfortunately, what we do here in Africa and in the rest of the developing world.
True. Thanks very much, Professor. It was extremely interesting to have you here in studio. And from our viewers, thanks very much, and stay tuned next week to Whether or Not.